Democratic Party deception on the Clinton projected surpluses continues on March 25, 2009. Let's first listen to Chairman Bernanke talk about the projected budget surpluses that the Democrats will soon be talking about.
It's a very complicated calculation, Senator, and I can't do it all here, but I think the tax revenues in the late 90s were partly not sustainable. They came from the stock market boom, and we know now that was not sustainable. So that was, I think, the idea that we would be debt-free, I think that was somewhat exaggerated. It's true that the revenue to GDP ratio did fall in the early part of the Bush presidency. It did come back up to something closer to historical averages. So it's a complicated issue.
Now recognize to discuss the Bush legacy, to look backward at the lessons we should have learned over the last 8 years so that we can chart the next 8 years more constructively. I yield 8 minutes to Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the Chairman's mark puts our nation back on track that we know works. In 2001, the Clinton administration left office with a projected surplus of $5.5 trillion projected for 10 years. That surplus represented a tremendous opportunity to address our challenges for the future, including enough to pay off the entire national debt held by the public in 7 years, or covering the entire Social Security surplus for 75 years, Social Security shortfall for 75 years without reducing benefits. And we had budget rules in effect, such as PAYGO, which guaranteed that we could continue and sustain those surpluses into the future. President Bush and the Republican Congress squandered that surplus. Republicans let budget rules lapse, including the pay-as-you-go rule, and fiscal responsibility evaporated. We can see in the red the last 8 years what happens when those budget rules are not applied. This chart shows what happens when you enact bad fiscal policy while doling out hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. The budget nosedived into deficit, replacing the $5.5 trillion surplus with approximately $3 trillion debt, a deterioration of approximately $9 trillion over the 8 years. This debt held by the public nearly doubled. Debt held by foreign investors more than doubled. And this shows the chart, the debt held in foreign governments. The next chart shows that the Bush administration and the Republicans overspent the budget by an average of $1 trillion a year and still produced the worst job performance since the Great Depression and the worst Dow growth since the Great Depression. The Clinton record, back to the first chart, proved that the fiscal responsibility is consistent with job growth and good economy. The Chairman's mark, which is based on the Obama budget, makes a sustained effort to reduce deficits, grow our economy, and climb out of the deep budgetary ditch that President Bush and the Republicans have created. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Chairman, with this budget resolution, we step forward for America's future with fiscal responsibility and renewed hope. Our nation expects new leadership from Democrats and Republicans. In this Congress, we simply must lead. We have been left with a mess. The debt of our nation has increased to unsustainable levels. In 2000, President Clinton and the Congress handed President Bush a budget surplus of $86.4 billion. It was in the black. By contrast, from 2008, President Bush handed President Obama another in the red deficit, close to $638.1 billion. In each year of the Bush presidency, more red ink piled on, nearly doubling U.S. debt to $6.7 trillion, while President Clinton left a $5.6 billion. Today, our job is to make wise decisions in troubling economic times. We are now a nation of debtors, borrowing from every country in the world, while our financial system has taken us for a ride. On whose watch did this happen? President Bush. Our trade deficit has also doubled under President Bush to $681 billion, rising from 2.8% of GDP to 5.9%, knocking more than 2 points off economic growth. The net result of it all is a deep recession. 12.5 million unemployed Americans, 4.4 million lost jobs just in 2008, the largest loss since World War II, whereas in the Clinton years, 22.7 million jobs were created. We must clean up this mess. Our prudent, honest budget meets our responsibilities and cuts the deficit in half by 4 years. Today, we begin to close the door to the Bush legacy and look to the future. Today, our nation moves forward again with this Democratic budget resolution.
The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, our Democratic budget is a clear departure from the misdirected policies and priorities of the past 8 years. As my colleagues know, President Bush was the first president since the Civil War to inherit a budget surplus. He squandered that surplus his very first year in office, and his economic and budget policies created the greatest deficits in American history. The borrow and spend policies of the Bush administration did not, however, improve the lives of ordinary Americans, let alone those who are most vulnerable in our country. The legacy of the past 8 years is an unemployment rate of 8.1%, with the rate for African Americans and Hispanics even higher. From 2001 to 2007, the number of people in poverty rose more than 13%, and more than 91 million people were living in low-income households, earning less than twice the federal poverty level, despite their best efforts to work and support their families. Over the same period, 3 million more Americans experienced extreme hunger, and 36.2 million Americans went hungry. Last year, even more people fell into hunger because of the rising costs for food and other basic needs, and the elderly and the children suffered the most. I am ashamed that in a country like ours we have a real hunger problem. It is a national scandal. The simple and sad fact is this: more people are hungry today than 8 years ago, and it's a lousy legacy and something that we have to remedy. No more cuts to Healthy Start, Head Start, summer meals, and maternal and child health programs. Too many kids and families have fallen through the cracks. Mr. Chairman, there are consequences to our actions, and over the last 8 years, the Bush policies have hurt the poor the hardest. We have a moral responsibility to change course, and clearly with President Obama and the Democratic budget, we will.
Thank you. And my colleague from Virginia, Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes in listening to the other side, you wonder, have you no shame? The economy and the budget we inherited are in shambles. Let's look at that legacy. The largest single deficit and projected deficit in American history on their watch. Doubling of the national debt that otherwise was in fact expected to shrink. Doubling on their watch. Unlike President Obama and this budget, anything but a transparent budget. Hat tricks used to frankly hide the real cost of government operations. And an economy in shambles, the worst since the Great Depression. 24 consecutive months of decline in the housing sector. The hollowing out of the manufacturing sector. Plummeting consumer confidence. Record numbers of bank failures. The largest single corporate loss in American history last quarter, AIG. Job losses of unprecedented proportions, shedding 651,000 job losses just last month. All the economy we inherited. If we do nothing, this economy is projected to contract by $2 trillion over a 2-year period. We can't afford inaction, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to participate in support of this budget as part of a mosaic, economic mosaic, to get people back to work and this economy working again. I thank my colleague.
Thank you, and I thank you for your thank my colleagues for their comments. Mr. Chairman, 8 years ago we were on course to paying off the entire national debt. For 8 years we had a great economy, and if we hadn't messed up the budget, we would have paid off the national debt held by the public by last year. We're now digging ourselves out of an economic ditch, and those efforts will cost a lot this year. But the challenge is getting back on course. In the last 8 years, the budget deteriorated $9 trillion. This year's investments will get us back on track to fiscal responsibility while making the necessary investments in our future to ensure that we could stay on that right track. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity to talk about the legacy and look forward to talking about the things we're going to do to fix the mess we're in. Thank you, and I yield back.
The tax revenues in the late 90s were partly not sustainable. They came from the stock market boom, and we know now that that was not sustainable. So that was, I think, the idea that we would be debt-free, I think that was somewhat exaggerated.